My name's Dr. Alan Watson. I am the Associate Dean for Education and Student Experience in the School of Social Sciences and Humanities at Loughborough University in the UK. I'm sorry, that's a mouthful. We're an interdisciplinary school, so we have 6 departments that includes Geography and Environment, which is the department that this programme is led. We also have departments in International Relations, Politics and History, in Law, Communication and Media, English, criminology, sociology, and social policy. So a very diverse disciplinary background in our school. I'm going to spend 5 minutes or so talking a little bit about the background to the programme, and then I'll introduce a couple of colleagues who are leading and teaching on the programme itself, for them to say a little bit more about the sorts of things you will learn in their particular modules. Just to say, I'm just watching at the bottom of the screen, and I'm watching all of the comments come in from people all over the world, which is absolutely wonderful to see, and amazing to have so many of you with us today. Just to say, I think before we start, that I hope wherever you are in the world that you're safe and well at the moment. It's a difficult set of circumstances out there at the moment, so we hope you're all well and safe. So a little bit about the programme. So this is a really unique distance learning programme that's delivered in a truly collaborative fashion between UNITAR and Loughborough University. And as the title suggests, it sits very much at the intersection of, on the one hand, climate change, energy provision and sustainability, and on the other hand, humanitarian action. And we've brought those together because we feel the need to bring those 2 areas into dialogue, as it were, that the 2 are very, very closely related, that one very strongly links to the other in the world today. And as we go through the webinar today, I'll ask colleagues to say a little bit more about their thoughts on the importance of that kind of join of those particular subjects. So a bit of just kind of pragmatic information on the programme itself. So the programme, the latest iteration, will start in September 2026. It's a 100% online programme, so it's web-based learning, and there'll be a mixture of what we call asynchronous activities. So these are activities you'll do in your own time from our learning platform, together with some synchronous activities where you'll meet with tutors, have some lectures and some weekly tutorials to support the learning that you're doing offline. And the programme is delivered in English. Now, the programme's excuse me, delivered in sort of 3 different levels. I'll run through these, but just to say, at the moment we're updating our web pages. So if you log on to the web pages, I'm sure Anna will provide the link in the chat, you'll just see the headline master's degree programme. But very, very soon we'll be changing that, so you can enter at one of 3 different levels. So you can enter at the full master's level, so that's 180 credits. So over 2 years, so you'll have 120 credits of taught modules plus a 60 credit dissertation over 2 or 3 years part-time, depending on what works with your kind of professional and personal circumstances. If you didn't want to commit to the full master's programme, either on the basis of cost or time, you could choose to take one of the other qualifications and then subsequently build upwards if you choose to. So you could take a postgraduate certificate, which is 60 credits. So you do 60 credits of taught modules. Then you can either leave it there, or you could choose to continue on to one of the larger awards. Then there's the postgraduate diploma. So that builds on the certificate by adding another 60 credits. So you've got 120 credits, all of taught content, and that would take place over 2 years. And again, you could either leave it there, or you can roll on to take the dissertation to get the full Master of Science. So a number of different options, either to start on the larger programme or to build your way through with a series of smaller qualifications. If we could pop to the next slide, Anna, thank you. Fabulous. Okay. So again, Anna will provide the information in the chat to go to the prospectus page, where you can see the various modules that are delivered on the programme. But just to give you a bit of a flavour, 50% of the modules are delivered by colleagues here at Loughborough University. So that, for example, includes modules on climate futures, on economic modelling, and on research design and the kind of the practice of doing research. And then 50% of the taught modules are delivered by colleagues and specialists from UNITAR, So, for example, on the humanitarian modules, so humanitarian development, climate policy, on the peacekeeping modules as well. And then if you're doing the full master's program, you do a 60 credit dissertation, and that dissertation is co-supervised. So you'll have one supervisor from Loughborough University and one supervisor who is a UNITAR colleague, a specialist in that field. So whichever of the programs you do, whether it's the postgraduate certificate, the diploma, or the master's, exactly 50% of what you do will come from us here at Loughborough, and 50% will come from colleagues at UNITAR. So you've got a really nice kind of split and balance there. Because it's delivered online, the idea is that it's really flexible. So as I say, we'll have certain touch points online, face to face with academic staff. And what we will do is we'll work those around the cohort, so dependent on the availability and the time zones of the cohort on the program. So the program's really suitable for those who are out there as working professionals, because you can build your independent study around your work. Having said that, we don't want you to sit at home on a computer alone and experience this really lonely educational experience. So there'll be interaction with us as tutors, but also many of the modules will have group work. So you'll have plenty of opportunity through your kind of offline interactions to engage with others that are on the program, to do various activities. We want to make it not just theoretical and conceptual, but kind of real world and tangible and applicable to the situations that you might find yourself working in. So there'll be lots of real world case studies, lots of practical training as well, to kind of supplement some of the more kind of academic work that we do. And then just to say on finance, so again, when Anna shares the prospectus page, you'll see the cost of the program. As you do it part-time, what happens is you pay it on a module by module basis. So the fee that you pay in any one time depends on the number of credits you're studying at that particular time. And then when you've completed those credits, you'll register on some new credits and kind of pay again. So you sort of pay on the go as a part-time student. And it's also worth noting we have a number of scholarships available, one of which goes up to 20% of the fees, depending on your educational background. So if you have a first-class degree or international equivalent, for example, you'll be eligible for up to 20% off your course fees. Yeah, and then I think there's one more, Anna. Yes, perfect. Okay. So as a minimum requirement, we're looking for students to have a 2-2 or the international equivalent, depending on the territory you come from, as a minimum in an undergraduate degree. We're not particularly strict on the sorts of degree that comes from. So it might come from the social sciences, it might come from the humanities, but equally it might come from the kind of sciences or engineering as well, depending on what you've done as an undergraduate and what your interests are going forward. We imagine that it'd be particularly applicable for those that already work or want to go on to work in sectors such as energy, climate, humanitarian sector, sustainable development, and so on. And also as well, given the aims of the programme, maybe for NGOs and staff working in some of the more kind of fragile or conflict affected regions where some of these issues are kind of particularly pertinent. And there'll obviously be a strong policy focus as well, so really applicable for policymakers and those going to be involved in policy around climate resilience and so on. One of the things that we're really kind of proud of in the programme is the collaboration not just between Loughborough and UNITAR, but here at Loughborough we have a research centre called STEER, which is Sustainable Transitions, Energy, Environment and Resilience. Had to look at my notes to remember that. And STEER's specialism is in applied energy systems modelling. So we have various tools and models that we use, which are out there in the real world being used to model complex energy problems right across the world. And we let our students get hands-on with those models, which they can then take and use out there in the world. And we have actually some really good examples of colleagues that have studied through STEER and then gone on to use that modelling in real world scenarios right across the world. We do a lot of work understanding what is a very complex global policy landscape in this space, and then it becomes even more, the policy landscape around climate and sustainability is complex enough, and then of course becomes even more complex when we begin to think about the humanitarian implications of all of this. So these are really complex global crises, and what we hope to do is to get you to think critically and across disciplines about how we can begin to tackle and understand some of these crises. And a lot of that will come from very much kind of real world project based grounded learning, which I'm sure colleagues will say more about in a moment. So I think that's it, Anna, in terms of introduction to the program. Fabulous, just waiting for my screen to catch up. There we go. Good. Okay, sorry, it froze for a second. I was a little bit worried. We'll begin to look down some of the, I can see some questions are coming in the chat. That's great. And I'm sure Anna's on top of those, and we'll try and pick a few to respond to. But I think first of all, it'd be really nice to hear from some of the faculty that are teaching on the program, a little bit maybe about their motivations for teaching what they do teach and what that teaching looks like on the program. I think maybe a couple of minutes from each, and I'll let colleagues introduce themselves as they begin. So Richard, perhaps we could go to you first to say a little bit about your kind of background and some of the teaching on the programme. Oh, we can't hear you, Richard. You're unmuted, but I'll give you 1 minute. That's fine. John Mark, maybe we could, while Richard deals with technical issues, we could maybe come to you. Same questions, really. So I guess some of your backgrounds, how you ended up teaching what you're teaching, and what it looks like on the program.
Absolutely. Hey, everyone. First of all, just it is amazing to sit there and see the participants popping up from all over the world, from every time zone. So that's inspiring in and of itself. So a big hello to everyone all over the world. My name is John Mark Walls. I'm based in Geneva, Switzerland, and I have had a interesting little career. I have worked for 8 United Nations agencies across the areas of health with the WHO, to labor with the International Labor Organization, trade, WTO, and also with climate, for the World Meteorological Organization, disaster risk reduction, with the UN agency focused on that. I've had a little bit of an interesting career in entrepreneurship, innovation with civic technology, and also worked in nonprofits, working to develop new approaches to civic engagement, student engagement. So it's been a little bit everywhere, but I think that's been a strength in that it's given me a lot of angles: public sector, private sector, multilateral, United Nations sector, to view from all around the levers of power, so to speak, the levers of influence, the mechanics, kind of like in a car, how things work, what that fuel is, who's driving it. And so it's giving a very good, well-rounded perspective. Now, the reason I'm excited about this course is because I feel like built into the DNA of this course is that experience. Now, climate, energy, humanitarian action, that is the topic, absolutely. But I would even like to take a little bit more of a step above that at maybe the 200,000 foot level. And for me, I'm teaching co-management for radically inclusive project planning and also humanitarian energy. And for both of those courses, I feel like there's a lot of layers to each. And I guess if I was to encourage you to look at this program, to consider it, it would be to better understand how complexity, whether it is across these 3 topics, and the interlinkages, but to understand complexity, how to deconstruct it, how to reconstruct it, how to use it, how to leverage it. And so beyond the topics of climate, energy, humanitarian action, for me, that's kind of an avatar. That's an example for us to use, and it's fascinating, and I love it personally. I'm a nerd for it. But to understand how that can be used and applied across a million different scenarios in a world that is increasingly complex. So for me, that's my motivation. That's what I'm interested in. Again, I'm a climate multilateral UN nerd. But I think there's something above that that I feel like is even more useful, that I feel like you can benefit from. So
Thank you, John Mark. That's really, really useful. Right, let's try again with Richard, see if we can see if we've sidestepped the technical issue.
Can you hear me now?
We can indeed, yes. Over to you, Richard.
It's just a question of choosing the right microphone. Ideally not the one on the laptop that's got its lid closed. Okay, so first of all, as others have said, it's incredible to see so many people joining us from so many different parts of the world. We're absolutely delighted that you've come along to join us. It's really terrific. And again, we see some areas that are, let's say, affected by conflict at the moment. So we really do hope you're staying safe. My name is Richard Hodgkins, and I'm an academic at Loughborough University. My job title is a reader in Climate Futures, which is British for associate professor. In case you're wondering, I don't just sit down reading all day. It'd be nice, but not quite. My role on this programme is to provide the climate background. It's the inescapable background that is driving many of the chronic and acute environmental problems that we need to address, and many of these problems that are also obviously affecting very, very human, very social, very economic issues, such as conflict, forced migration, and so on and so forth. So the way I come up this is from the perspective of the climate crisis. We know it's accelerating. The 3 warmest years on record have been the last 3. And we know that there are some quite important physical changes taking place in the world. So I see a number of people joining us from African countries, and we know that the forests of Africa have become carbon sources, not carbon sinks now, same as the forests in South America. We've seen exceptional storm patterns causing disastrous flooding around the Indian Ocean, which maybe some people experienced, but hopefully to a limited degree. And the WMO has pointed out that we've had 6 consecutive years now of very widespread disruption to the global water cycle, which threatens the water security of hundreds of millions of people. So the module I deliver myself is called Climate Futures, but we're acutely aware that the future really has been underway for a few years now. We're projecting into a future which we're already experiencing in some ways. At the same time as this, of course, we're seeing a rise in reactionary politics. I mean, in many parts of the world, that's making it more difficult for research. That's making it more difficult for data collection for all kinds of reasons, including for humanitarian reasons. So addressing this is very important, particularly in the current climate. Yeah, I think whilst it's quite easy to look at the world and become, let's say, a little bit gloomy sometimes, we know that public support for climate action is strong and is resilient. We know that there's a surge of interest in becoming independent from very high and very volatile fossil fuel prices, and obviously that's extremely relevant at the moment as the the oil price is sort of launching vertically as we speak. So that needs to be supported. Needs to be supported financially, also in terms of education and of skills, and that is where this program hopefully comes in. I've seen people in the chat talking about different sectors that they may be interested in. So the Masters here develops skills that are particularly relevant to the energy sector, not only, but as Alan mentioned previously, the department here in Loughborough has a research centre with expertise in energy and resource modelling that uses open source software tools that have been developed through the UK aid-funded Climate Compatible Growth Programme. And of course, one of the benefits of that is no expensive software, no subscriptions. It's meant to be something that's available for literally everyone. So that gives us context for developing what we describe as sustainability competencies, things like systems thinking, things like working with uncertainty, translating analysis into policy narratives, and essentially what we sometimes describe as making the business case for the clean energy transition. I could say a little bit more about that now, but I've spoken for a while, so maybe if I just be quiet for a moment, we can move on and maybe come back to that.
Thanks, Richard. That's much appreciated. So, in the background, thanks to those that have been putting the questions in the Q&A. Please continue to do so. So while we're talking, we're also trying to answer those questions as the team. So please bear with us. Just I think a couple of the headline questions that we get a lot. The first is around fees. So just to say very quickly, a couple of questions about the fees on the various level of programs, and just to say we're just in the process of confirming those, and they'll be live on the website very soon. So it's just to encourage you, if you're interested in the postgraduate certificate or the postgraduate diploma, just to check back in the next couple of weeks or so at the same link that's been provided, and you should see the others appear with the fee. So we're very close to that. Apologies for the slight delay. On a related note, unfortunately, it isn't possible to study the programme without cost. So there are fees associated with the programme, but depending on your level of previous academic attainment, if you have a really strong undergraduate profile, you can apply to have up to 20% off the fees. And as I say, because it's a part-time programme, even if you take the full masters, over 3 years, then your fees will be staggered in each semester depending on the number of credits that you take. That's a really nice question, actually. Thank you, Sadaf. So I'm going to go to Richard on that one. So Richard, I'll read it for you, and then maybe you can have a think about the responses. I read it. Sorry to drop you in it, but I think this is one you might like. So it's about and John Mark as well, actually. It's about across the programme, but it's about how our modules facilitate interdisciplinary learning. So how do we look to integrate climate science, economic policy, humanitarian practice, rather than putting them into silos? So we've got Richard. Yeah, you just disappeared for a moment, Richard, but you're back. So Richard, maybe you could just reflect on that, for example, in the context of climate futures, kind of the importance of interdisciplinarity.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me again now?
We can, yeah.
Yeah. Every time I come off the chat, my camera dies for some reason.
Same. I've got the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Technology, huh?
Yeah. No, it's a great question and a really important question, and I think it's one of the things we've tried hard to address. Climate, sustainability, peace building, these will never be advanced through silo thinking, through conventional academic disciplines. And I think that's very much reflected in the structure of the programme. If you look at the titles of the modules, you will see they're addressing specific problems. They're very problem focused. You won't see Introduction to Climate Science 1 or, you know, Policy Basics, you know, 101. You will see thematic titles like mapping and modeling the Sustainable Development Goals, for example. So we absolutely try to take that on board as much as we possibly can. In terms of the energy modeling, for example, it's clear that these can address the UNESCO Education for Sustainable Development Goals, things like systems thinking, anticipatory thinking, integrated problem solving, working across energy, environment, water, economics, policy. These are across all academic disciplines. So we, on a personal note, really, I think that's where all of us find the most interesting areas to work. And I think it's also where the student can bring as much of themselves to the course and the modules as possible, because I think everyone has relevant experience in these areas, sometimes educational, sometimes professional, but anyone who's living in the world can have views and experiences that are relevant to what we're doing.
Thanks, Richard. John Mark, any thoughts on interdisciplinarity as it applies to your teaching?
Yeah, I mean, very, very quickly, you can't teach. I mean, if we look at those three topics, you know, climate, energy, humanitarian action, you can't teach one without the other. I mean, there's one big or multiple big links through them all. And in a larger, more global context, it's all the same thing. You know, if we look at the topic of energy, in a broad sense, energy is both a cause and a solution to the climate crisis, right? Dirty, inefficient, poor energy policy has, in effect, caused bad climate effects. And good, clean, efficient energy solutions policy will be a major solution, right? And humanitarian action is required because there's a climate crisis. And you can take each of these three components, again, leaving it siloed, but just for the sake of discussion, you can take each of these three and you can play around with them like that. And they're all interlinked, right? And so in these courses, it's actually going to be a fun thing to sit there and to juggle across all the different courses, to juggle them and to play around and to roll with them in your mind and to think about those connections. And if you look at the word interdisciplinarity, that is the core of these topics. And again, stepping back, it's the core of all global topics at the moment. And so this is an excellent, framework, an excellent set of topics to explore that interconnectedness of that global interconnectedness, if you will. So it's actually, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's a fun part of the program.
Great, thank you both. I hope that's answered the question. So I'm going to go to a couple in the chat and then back to the Q&A if I can. So one of the questions was from Fernando, which was about prior experience and whether if you don't have an undergraduate degree, we'll take into account prior experience. The answer is yes, but the answer is also that it's very, very much on a case-by-case basis. So it's essentially, I guess, an academic judgment, usually based on a direct conversation with you as an individual to understand your background and whether you're in a position where you succeed at master's study. So it's very much not a personal evaluation. It's very much, we wouldn't want to bring people onto the program where we felt they might struggle without the correct academic background. But absolutely, in some circumstances, people have a professional background which more than compensates for not having an undergraduate program. So I'd encourage you in the first instance to reach out to us on the contact details that I'm sure Anna has provided through the course of it on the chat. Have a conversation with us so we can better understand where you're coming from, and we'll take it from there. There's another question from Nyobo, which was about practical environmental projects, which is a really good question. So the one thing I'd say there is that your if you do the full master's program and you do the dissertation, your choice of dissertation topic and the research you choose to do for that dissertation is absolutely yours, within a kind of broad applicability to the program. So you'll have one supervisor from Loughborough and one from UNITAR, and they'll help you kind of design that program of research. It might be something that you've not done before but you're really interested in, or it might be something that relates to your work or professional background that you would like to turn into an academic project. But that project is absolutely yours to design, so you could do something kind of you could do something really interesting. Another question, so this is again another kind of grand one. John Mark, I might come to you first, and I'll try and give you the spirit of it. So thinking about the climate crisis and humanitarian issues as kind of these pressing global priorities, at the same time, the person that's made the comment, who's anonymous, has said quite rightly that we live in a very volatile political environment. So I guess the question is, sort of how can we kind of deal with that through education in a way which I guess equips students when they go out into the world to deal with the changing world. I'm thinking, John, might be a particularly good question for you, because obviously you have quite a lot of experience, as you outlined, kind of working across different organisations. So maybe it might be a case of perhaps reflecting on some of your experience of the world kind of changing around you as you do practice.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key word, the one word for takeaway would be we're living in a shock moment. The US, instituted this starting February, March last year with the cuts to the multilateral system. It pulled out very actively from engagement with the UN system and other international organizations. And so there's been a political and financial withdrawal, right? And so that has created this domino effect, because NGOs also are lacking funding. And so there's been a major pullout of funding. There's been a political upheaval. I mean, just turn on BBC, it's clear, or your local news channel. So it's clear, we cannot deny that we are living in a shock moment, not just politically with regards to security, but also with regards to climate. I mean, major players have pulled out of international agreements. So there has been a loss of will, political and financial, to help address these issues at the moment, right? And so the other one, what I would say is that it's also an opportunity, right? I would say it's an essential moment to reflect. If you are working right now, continue to work. But if you have an opportunity to study and to reflect, it's a gem, it's a diamond moment to be able to sit there and process what's going on, because the things are going to change in the next 1 to 3 years, and it will be a completely different world by 2030. And so when this course is over, when you would exit this course, you will have been able to watch, observe, process, again, use the words deconstruct, reconstruct, play around with all of these critical global issues it's this moment of upheaval. And so I would take away the other word, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity and it's a good moment to learn and focus deeply on what's going on, because it is a transformational moment.
Thanks, John Mark. Yeah, I think that's really powerful, actually, because I mean, certainly for us as an academic team, and I imagine for many of the people that are kind of on the webinar, this maybe enhances and strengthens the motivation to want to study in a way where you can go out into the world and make a difference at a really, really difficult time. And that's a challenge that we all face, but one that we kind of, that we essentially must face up to, if you like. I'm going to another Q&A question, this time for Richard, I think. So the question is from Sadaf. How does the programme ensure that perspectives from climate vulnerable regions, so Richard, you previously gave the example of Africa, how does it ensure that we integrate those into the curriculum? So maybe you could give 1 or 2 examples from your own module.
Yeah, so did I hear you correctly? It's how do we integrate issues from climate vulnerable regions?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, global warming, the greenhouse effect. This is very important scientifically, but it's not necessarily very meaningful to everyday people in different parts of the world. So we start with some basic scientific understanding, as is necessary to understand what's happening in the world, but we very quickly move on to make sure that it's as applicable as possible as it can be to your context. So in the case of the energy modeling tools that are used, they have developed specific platforms for different parts of the world. There's certainly an Africa one. There's certainly a Latin America one as well, and that's wholly dedicated towards local and regional contexts. In climate futures, our focus is on what a location of your choice will look like in the future, in climate terms, in terms of the impacts it will experience, and in terms of the measures that will be necessary to address those impacts. And this is what we do every year with students who are currently with us in person. Most people are interested in looking at their home country or a city in their home country. Apart from the British students, because our country is really very boring in climate terms, so they tend to go for other areas as well. But most students look at their home country, and there are an increasing and very useful array of free online data and tools to do that. So essentially, we create a picture of the future climate development of a particular location and bring in as much as we possibly can of the knowledge, understanding of the individual student. So you put as much of yourself into that as you can to make it as authentic and relatable as possible.
Thanks, Richard. That's really helpful. So this time I have a question which I think is best directed at Alex, and I have to apologise to Alex because she's just recovering from a heavy cold. So I hope he's able to feels okay to answer.
Okay.
I think it's a really interesting question. So this is from Arif, and it talks a little bit about I guess it's sort of two questions in one. I think for me, one of which is the alignment of this program with some of the strategic UN goals. And then I guess the role of the UN in a time when international order is sort of, very, very unstable. So I guess there's two questions in one there, Alex.
Sure. Thank you for the question. So I think I can respond also from the perspective of our specific unit. It might be helpful to give you an idea. So this program, I mentioned I'm a program coordinator at UNITAR, and the unit from which this program derives in partnership with Loughborough University is called Online Learning and Education. And is very much focused then on that level of expertise. My colleague Alan just referred at the beginning that our program is online. And of course, the needs and requirements and the important things to consider when you are developing an online program is something that our unit very much focus on. And I will share with you also in the chat what is our approach, and you can read more into it. That said, whenever we design a program, we very much take into consideration our United Nations mandate. And as I said at the beginning, we as UNITAR are very much focused on bridging the gap between knowledge, experience, or even, exponentiating the bridges among these axes. So this program reflects key concerns on one side, but also priorities at the UN level. The climate emergency has been stressed so many times and has been one of the issues the Secretary General has been focusing the most, at times even having some criticism directed at him for this perceived alarmistic approach. And of course, the UN is continues to be, despite the changes in the sector and the issues my colleague John Mark just referred, a central actor in terms of humanitarian action support, but also policy. So all those elements are very much considered here, included in the program, in discussion also with Loughborough University. So as part of a dialogue in terms of what the university identifies, the research they have been conducted in the field, and ours. So it has a rationale of co-creation, a cooperation, and leveraging from the different areas of expertise, UNITAR on one hand, Loughborough on the other. So you'll see, I would say, the key strategic framework of UNITAR reflected, for sure, and the UN mandate throughout, with emphasis, of course, in the subject areas we teach. And just to finalize, because I raised my hand just before, to maybe had something about interdisciplinarity or transdisciplinarity that we aim to include this program. This, of course, happens at the structural level when we start co-designing it and when we'll implement it. But I also wanted to highlight perhaps the human elements of, or how it can translate, and just to see, I think you have probably the perspective already. This is a very close team, and we work in strong collaboration with each other, and meaning that, of course, we'll have, you know, the necessary meetings, conversations to be sure to include those bridges among modules, regardless of them being Loughborough's or UNITAR's. So in a way, things will be cohesive and will link to each other because they need to, as John Mark was just mentioning, but also at the team level, this is a work that is done together. So you'll feel that in the different courses. And my last point also is about Munira, and you addressed this already, Alan, about the pathways and considering and engaging NGOs for capstone projects. So this is certainly something that can occur at the research level. But I take this chance to say I've been seeing some suggestions there in the chat too about angles, about someone mentioned environmental lawyers. And we wanted also to highlight that this feedback that we receive here does not go to waste, and is something that we can also consider, you know, integrating in a different way, considering in the different modules. So alongside questions, feedback and ideas are also very welcome. So I hope I responded to the question. Thank you, Alan.
Thanks, Alex. No, that was a great response. Thank you. So I'm aware of time, so I'm going to keep going through the questions because you've had lots, and this is absolutely wonderful. Just for context, there are about, you know, there are a good few hundred people on the call, so we're trying to get through all the questions as best as we can. A really good one actually from Candice. So this is about how the structures of the various programs work. So I'll just run through it. So they're overlapping, they're not distinct, and they build on each other. So essentially, if you imagine the full master's program is 180 credits, 120 of those credits are taught modules and 60 is the dissertation. Now, if I go back to the very beginning, the first 60 credits of that is the postgraduate certificate. So it's 4 15-credit taught modules on different subjects. So it's the same first 4, whether you take a PG certificate or the master's program. Similarly, the postgraduate diploma is the 120 taught credits that are the same as the master's program, the only difference being that you don't do the dissertation. So essentially, just to recap, you could do a postgraduate certificate, 60 taught credits, so 4 modules over 1 year, and you could just leave it at that and just leave with the postgraduate certificate. Or you might choose to then come back and say, okay, so now I'd like to do the diploma. I'm going to take an additional 60 credits in another year, 4 different modules. Okay, so then we've got the postgraduate diploma, and then you might say, great, okay, I've come this far. Now I'd really like the full masters, so I'm going to do the 60 credit master's dissertation in the 3rd year. So it's flexible in terms of where you would like to start from. So you can either decide, right, I want to do the full master's program, I'm going to do it in 2 or 3 years, and that's feasible for me in terms of cost and alongside my professional work or whatever else I'm doing. Or actually you might start with a postgraduate certificate and see how it goes from there. So hopefully that makes it clear, but they're essentially, they draw on the same material, if that sense, and they just kind of build up the number of credits towards the full master's program. I've had a few questions as well about kind of on-site masters or PhD programs. Just to say, this is the only program that we deliver collaboratively with UNITAR, but I've tried to put links in the chats to some of the on-site masters programs, but also PhD research. Would be, I think, very excited to get suggestions for PhD research where it might be interesting to be co-supervised by colleagues from Loughborough and UNITAR as part of a collaborative program, and there are some mechanisms through which we could potentially make that work, which would be quite fun. So I think very much if you're interested in research in this particular space, you can reach out us. The contact details on the website. Sorry, just reading through the questions very, very quickly. Alex, this might be one for you if that's okay. So I guess it's just a question from Sadaf again about, I guess, how we might bring in kind of real world case studies and experience. I know, for example, there are colleagues often associated with UNITAR that you've drawn in that have kind of real world practitioner experience. So maybe just we say a little bit about how we kind of draw on those in this and maybe on some of your other programs as well.
Yes, absolutely. So I think I agree. It's a great question. So to give you an example, our approach, and I'm speaking from the UNITAR modules perspective too, but I'm sure this is shared by our colleagues at Loughborough, also in bridge with SEER, as you mentioned, the research center, and different contexts, different scholars from different contexts. But in our case, to give you an example, if we're talking, and because Alan highlighted, for instance, the example of other courses, at the moment in a course about protection of civilian in complex contexts, we have different topics. Let's talk, for instance, about reducing threats and vulnerabilities, and we are using the specific case study of Ukraine and specific approaches and case studies that deal on site with reducing threats and vulnerabilities. We, in terms of the planning protection strategies, we looked into, for instance, the specific context of Sudan moment. So that gives you an idea. We're very much anchored in the current context whenever we address these tools, these pedagogical tools, the case studies you just mentioned, and we very much always welcome or give room or open space to consider any additional ones that might reflect students' concerns, but also practical needs. For instance, if you're doing you're doing this program while you're working in a specific organization, so there's always room to encompass different case studies, of course, in alignment with the subject topics of the course. That gives me the opportunity maybe to respond also. There was a question about the importance of, I think, South Asia universities, and if we expand a bit, the role of Global South educational institutions, and we very much value those contributions, and we absolutely hold a decolonization oriented anti-racist approach to content in line with the UN guidelines on that. And we very much, as Alan was also saying, very much able to also welcome scholars and practitioners from those contexts. And therefore you will see that lens reflected, which we consider absolutely necessary, not only important. I hope I answered.
Super. Thanks, Alex. Yeah, I'm aware of the time, and there's still quite a few questions in the chat. So we obviously won't be able to pick those up now. I think Anna will be able to share details of how you can get in touch with us. So I think we'd absolutely encourage you for some of these questions that we haven't been able to answer, whether that's about the practicalities of the program and fees and funding and how you apply, or it might be about kind of content. I've seen quite a few questions that are about kind of careers and how the careers are shaping up in a changing environment, which I think is really interesting as well. And so yes, thanks, Anna. So I've just seen the two different emails there, one directly to UNITAR and one to Loughborough. So please feel free to copy them both so the correct person can pick it up. I can see thank you to colleagues who I can see have been typing away in the various parts of the chat and the Q&A. We're extremely grateful for all the questions that have come in. Just one, if I can pick it up just before we finish, one that's a number on entry requirements. So the first it was a question around language and IELTS, which is a really good question. As it stands, we do require IELTS even if you have a professional background in English, but we can provide you some advice on how to get a quick and not too expensive IELTS test, which, given a professional background in English, really shouldn't be too difficult. I think it's a 6.5 with a 6 in each of the elements off the top of my head. Also about entry qualification. So it's really important that you do have an undergraduate qualification. So in UK terms, that's the level 6 qualification, or an international equivalent. So unfortunately, we can't accept lower level qualifications unless there is an equivalent professional experience that we feel balances that out. So that's really important. And just to say as well, just to reiterate, that we are being quite holistic in terms of the sorts of programs you might have studied previously. We're aware that people might want to do this program because they've transitioned to a different career. They would like to transition into a different career. They maybe come from climate science or engineering or something and want to do something that's a little bit more social sciences. So we encourage you to apply, or if you're not sure, please get in touch with and ask the question and we can talk you through it. So I think we are very much sort of bang on time, so that's really great. Thank you for all your questions. And thank you to John Mark and to Richard and Alex. I'll maybe hand back to you for the closing word.
Sure. Just to reinforce what you said, how grateful we are for the interest and the engaged session. As I wrote in the chat, we're very thankful for the very interesting questions and also the practical questions that helped us, clarify some of the practicalities and requirements of the program. And as Alan just said, our emails, please take note of the emails that our colleague Anna shared in the chat. And as a farewell, I just want to thank my colleagues, John, Mark, Richard, and Alan, and of course our colleague Ana Moreira, who organized the webinar and all these from the emails you received, from the registration page, from the excellent facilitation of screens, and her support in answering some of the questions and sharing the links. Thank you so much, Anna, and thank you all for coming. It was it passed too quickly. It was a very joyous session, and as my colleague said, very touching to see so many from all over the world during these turbulent times. We are indeed very grateful and hope that everyone keeps safe.
Thanks.
And we hopefully will see you, or at least some of you, in our program. Bye. Have a good rest of the day, everyone.